going to be posted to this buy and sell website. So buyandsell.gc.ca is a critical component in your search for the government information. It is where the government posts all of our tender opportunities over $25,000. And you really need to be looking in this space if especially you have an interest in work that's upcoming, where you have a clear understanding that it should be coming, and how do we help you find that information that you may need. And there's some ways to certainly do that. So with the buy and sell, it's free to use. It's free to get on and look around. There are some tenders on the buy and sell website that are being transferred over to a new platform. I don't want to get too deep into that transfer, but just basically saying that in some circumstances, outside of the program of work for wrecked, hazardous, or abandoned vessels, you may find that we're also using different portals. Again, the number one thing is ask questions early. And know that through OSME, we can either direct you to the folks that you need to talk to, or we can explain some of the process ourselves. It will depend on a number of circumstances. On the way through, one of the things that you may see come up time and time again when you're trying to do work as a company with Public Services Procurement Canada, PSPC, is they may ask you to register in a couple of systems. One is the registration and supplier registration information. It basically gives you a number that looks very similar to a business number so that you can then work in the space, and it gives you some prompts that helps focus some of your search energy or focus you on where you may need to be positioned. What do we call the good or service you're trying to sell us? And maybe where do you even fit in the supply chain? And they're kind of some of the things that we definitely like coaching folks on, so that you're using the right language on the way through. This is not a PSPC program slide, but this is for the Indigenous Business Directory. And our colleagues at Indigenous Services Canada asked me to briefly talk about this. The big thing to understand is that in order to actually work, especially in the procurement strategy for Aboriginal business space, or to really, really show that your company meets, really, really like to see companies in, because it assists us in showing that you've gone through the right processes, that you've met a couple of criteria that are very important. And then it's easier to pull you off this list. So by being on this list as a company or an organization that's trying to do business with the government of Canada, this is a critical piece that you should consider on the way through. If you have got questions on registering in the Indigenous Business Directory, again, you can go through us, OSME, but we'll basically forward you across to our colleagues at Indigenous Services Canada that can help with any questions or onboarding processes that you may have regarding this directory. Now, one of the big things we wanted to focus on today, and one of the key underlying elements associated with the work that we're talking about, where we're talking about wrecked, hazardous, or abandoned vessels, is that we're organizing, or we're intending to organize the work on supply arrangements. So basically, the government has a series of lists that we use to decide how we're going to do work and when we're going to do work. And by having these lists organized earlier, it's pre-competed to some extent, where a lot of the initial nuts and bolts are all sorted, and the companies that are on these lists can actively bid on work that's coming up. But the problem that you may face as a company is that if you didn't know these lists exist, or if as an EDO and you have companies in your community, if they don't know that these lists exist, then you really can be in a tough spot, because you may not be able to bid directly on work that's associated with a supply arrangement. So what happens with a supply arrangement is that if we have an ongoing requirement for something, we're going to build out one of these lists. Then what we're going to do is, through the list, we're basically going to do almost like a mini request for proposal or process afterwards that has minimal requirements to make it easy on everyone, because there was almost this pre-qualification process on the way through. So there's another list that you may have heard of for the government of Canada, which is called a standing offer. Standing offers are often more so related to goods and supply arrangements are often more related to services. So in this scenario, all the work we're talking about under this program is associated with supply arrangements, but you have to know that it is different from a standing offer. And also provinces, municipalities, other levels of government, the MASH sector may have other names for similar things. So the big thing I would almost recommend is don't make assumptions that because your company or as an EDO supporting a company, that because you've done this process before, that this is going to be the same. It's really, really important for you to go in and go through the materials and fully understand what that process can actually look like. Because what we often say in OSME is that we don't want you reading these government documents like they're a novel. We want you reading the documents strategically like they're built out of Lego. So what you need to do is find out what are the critical components that you need to focus on. Like, is this a real opportunity for your company? Do I want to work in this space? Am I in the correct space, or should I be maybe in a supply chain position? Because there's going to be a lot of smaller companies associated with this type of work that may not necessarily be the lead contractor, or what we would refer to as a prime contractor. You may actually be a company that's situated in the supply chain. And if you are, then one of the key parts of your process may be to make sure that you are creating opportunities by networking and forming relationships with those companies that are listed on the supply arrangement. I talked with one company a couple of years back that had been quite successful in working with government, but they were able to be successful because they recognized that it wasn't necessary for them to bid on everything. They believed that they were well positioned about 2 tiers down in the supply chain of their particular work. And by being there, they knew how to focus or figure out who were likely going to be the companies bidding on the majority of the government work, forming relationships with those companies, and making sure that where those bids came in, that they were part of that bid. And they said that they knew they were successful when they were attaching their company as part of the supply chain under multiple prime contractors that would be bidding on opportunity. So I think that's an critical component. Do you need to be on the supply arrangement, or are you somewhere in the supply chain itself? So as you go through this process, the big thing that I want folks to focus on is that supply arrangements have a particular elements that you need to have an awareness of. We always go back, read the documents, understand what must be done. That so may, shall, and can are the three words, or sorry, must, shall, and will are the three words that I recommend companies search government documents for, because they form the mandatory criteria. So if you use a Control F function on a PDF, a government PDF, and you search for those words, you're going to find out where a lot of the stuff is that's going to be absolutely required. And on the way through, that can be very, very helpful. So again, I want to formulate a bit of a difference between supply arrangements and standing offers. There's going to be particular elements for each supply arrangement depending upon what the body of work is and what's happening. So again, don't make assumptions based on stuff that maybe you've done in the past. You're going to want to go in and you want to get kind of the overarching statement of work. You want to know the mandatory criteria. And then you're talking about how to bid. And what you're going to see is you're going to see bidder instructions within the document that you need to go through once you've established that this is a space that you want to work in. And when you look at it, look for those mandatories, look for the things that are required. I know that I've talked to companies where what they'll do is set up in a separate Excel spreadsheet that's almost like a table that they use, a checklist, as they're going through these processes. And one of the things that I definitely want to say is ask questions early in the process where possible. So you wouldn't ask those questions to OSME. You would provide those questions in writing to the contracting authority, to the team that's organizing the opportunity. My office can only talk about strategy and generalities. We cannot talk about an open tender actively in a way that can help you maneuver through that specific work. That has to be done by the team that's organizing the work. But there's no wrong door point of entry. So if you do contact OSME, you would just see us work with those other colleagues in the organization to make sure that you get the answers you need in a timely fashion. So I've mentioned this already. It's one of the most critical components of working with government, because our language is different, because our processes can appear cumbersome, because it can be very new for people, is that it's really important to make sure that you ask questions during the procurement process. And if you ask them early, that's even better. One of the things we've done with this set of virtual meetings, or these opportunities to talk about this program of work, is that we're trying to prepare you early enough, or your community early enough, that you can think about this work, so that as the various steps in this process occur, you can be more and more ready to support your community or at your business in moving through to hopefully be successful in the work that comes out of this. And also, we don't really see this as our only opportunity to chat with you. We can do one-on-one meetings with you as an individual community or a company, and we can provide you guidance on the various elements that you may need to know about as you're preparing or understanding that scope of work on the way through, and when the documents will come out. And so we'll also work through Cando and through our other PSPC partners to make sure that where possible, we're advising as early as we can in the process is what is going to happen next. And by doing so, hopefully we can make sure that people have what they need on the way through. This is just a general point that some people get a little concerned when you're about to submit, and then you go into a system and you find out that, because certainly during COVID, that we're doing a lot of things electronically, and we're using these ePost Connect system through Canada Post for bid submission. But it takes a bit of effort to get the account set up. So one of the things that you want to do early in the process, not right the day before the bid must be submitted, is go in and set up this account early. It may actually be very quick, but we don't want people to try to do this in the last minute. So again, what you would want to look at in the documents is any bidder instructions. And based on the bidder instructions, you would want to confirm how you're to submit your work. And this would be potentially one option, but it is more so the default way of doing business these days that we would want you to have an awareness of. So there is contact information, and we'll make sure everyone has access to this. I know that it's the presentation today is being recorded. You can reach the Office of Small Medium Enterprises across the country. I am located in Pacific region, but that doesn't stop you from talking with any office across the country, and anyone should be able to provide you basic information. Now, if you're looking for more and more specific information, we also would welcome anyone contacting myself, and then therefore we can follow up with you on what you need to do. And I will stop sharing my screen, assuming I can do that here. Stop share. And so I believe we're going to probably take questions towards the end. I got on a little bit later, so I don't know if we talked about that, but Paul, you can either let me know if there's anything else you'd like me to mention based on any of the questions that may have come in, and otherwise I'll be standing by to answer any questions at the appropriate time.
That's great, John. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've let everyone know that we'll hold the questions towards the end. There'll be lots of time to address all the questions that come in, so as not to interrupt the flow of the presentations. Thank you, John, very much. As John said, I can speak when John invites you to contact them, and he says that they're willing to roll up their sleeves and help out. I can attest to you that that's the case, because he's really gone to bat for us at Cando, and so I can highly recommend that if you have questions that you think OSME can assist you with, please contact them, and they will, in fact, assist you with that. So next on our schedule is Erin Fox. As I mentioned at the top, Erin is the manager of the Marine Navigation and Remediation Division with Public Service and Procurement Canada, PSPC. Erin?
Thanks, Paul. Do you want me to go ahead and share my screen as well?
Yes, please.
Okay. And I have to admit that I don't know that I've done this in Zoom for a while because we tend to use.
You can do it.
I can do it. I'm gonna try.
There we
Just let me
go.
know
There we
when
go.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna try to make it full screen.
Yeah, just go to slideshow.
There we go.
Yeah, excellent. Okay.
Excellent. And just, oops, other screen. There. Can you still see my presentation?
Looks good.
Excellent. Thank you. So thanks everyone for taking the time to meet with us today. I know that Paul and John are both on the West Coast. I'm in the Ottawa area on the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin. I have lived and worked and raised my family here for 40 of my 42 years. So thanks so much again for joining us. I'm going to talk, if John, as John likes to say, I'm going to talk about what makes our supply arrangements a unicorn, as he would say. A little bit about the strategy, about the wrecked abandoned hazardous vessels, very high level information. I know a lot of folks might already have heard of it. I know there's been our partners at Transport Canada and Coast Guard have been going around and talking to different communities about the policy itself. What I'm here to talk about a bit more is how the procurement's going to work under that policy. A little bit about WAHV. Basically, we're talking about the wrecked or abandoned hazardous vessels that can really be found in waterways in every corner of our country. These vessels can pose environmental, health, and economic hazards. And to address the issue, the federal government introduced the Wrecked, Abandoned, or Hazardous Vessels Act. It actually received royal assent in July 2019. And the act actually improves owner responsibility and liability, addresses irresponsible vessel management, and enhances the federal ability to take proactive action on hazardous vessels. Transport Canada and Coast Guard each have responsibilities under the act, some other federal departments as well, but most of what we're going to be doing from a procurement perspective will be with Transport Canada and Coast Guard. And Public Services and Procurement Canada, which is my team and I, is supporting both departments with the development and management of procurement tools, in this case, supply arrangements, for services required to address the vessels, such as marine technical assessments and recycling and disposal services. So you might be asking what vessels qualify under the Act to be addressed by the federal government. Basically, any vessel touching the water, no matter the size, shape, or material, that appears dilapidated or abandoned that poses or may pose a hazard, is sunk, is stranded or grounded, or is adrift or might become so. So the way these vessels are going to be handled first are going to be by maintaining an inventory of the wrecked, abandoned, or hazardous vessels that are located across the country. Secondly, the vessels will all undergo an initial hazard evaluation. And then that evaluation will apply the risk assessment methodology to prioritize vessels for further actions. And then finally, tendering services for the vessels that are identified for further action. So those services work could include further technical assessments, more detailed technical assessments, as well as other types of remediation services. There we go. So PSPC is setting up some national procurement tools or supply arrangements for the services required for wrecked, abandoned, or hazardous vessels. I should note that some short-term procurements to address urgent requirements have been tendered in various regions over the last year, and probably will continue to be for the next few months as we're still rolling out, finalizing and rolling out these supply arrangements. The first supply arrangement we issued was for marine technical services or technical assessments. The RFSA was posted to buy and sell. It is now closed, but although the notice has closed, companies can submit a response to the RFSA at any time. It will remain perpetually open. So just reach out to the contracting authority in there. You'll have this deck, as Paul's mentioned, so you can see the link right here is there. But again, like I said, even though it'll note on buy and sell that it's closed, just reach out to the contracting authority and you can apply. The supply arrangement covers various streams and categories of work for 5 different vessel types. So it's very important to understand that companies do not need to meet the requirements for all of the streams and categories in order to receive a supply arrangement. Companies are instead invited to submit a response to the RFSA for whatever combination of work streams, categories, and vessel types fit with their capabilities. So, for example, we understand a lot of companies can work with perhaps smaller or medium vessels, but not larger vessels. They don't necessarily have the facilities for that. The supply arrangement is further refined by region, allowing companies to identify in which areas of Canada they are able to conduct the work. We're also working on 2 more supply arrangements for recycling. Both of them will be for recycling, vessel recycling and disposal services. There will be separate supply arrangements for the small and medium vessels versus the large vessels. And then, you know, one thing that we really we're hoping folks will remember and join us for is that, you know, industry is going to have the opportunity to review and comment on the draft requests for supply arrangements, or RFSAs, prior to them being released formally on buy and sell. And we're looking at the May timeframe for that. We're compiling a list of companies and contacts that will receive the draft RFSAs for review. Currently, there are over 40 companies on the list, which were identified through a request for information we did last spring. But if you'd like to be added to the list, please just reach out to me. It's erin.fox@pwgsc.gc.ca, and I think I might have neglected to put that email address on the deck, but we'll make sure that you can access that. The RFSA will include provisions to recycle and or otherwise dispose of vessels in environmentally friendly ways. So in the coming months, we'll also determine if there are other services that will require that will actually require on a frequent enough basis to warrant the development of other national procurement tools. But for right now, we're just focusing on these services. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking a bit about how we're going to be doing the selection of bidders under the supply arrangement, because typically, if you know how PSAB works with supply arrangements, typically there's a separate stream for PSAB, and we chose not to do that for technical and environmental reasons, simply because it would just be you know, we already have with as I mentioned, you know, the different types of vessels, 5 different categories, different types of streams. You know, if we doubled that, it would be a bit of a monster of a supply arrangement. So we're achieving a similar the same type of thing, just through how we're going to choose, kind of select our list of bidders for who that is going to receive that small RFP under the supply arrangement. So many of, if not most of the vessels are located on Indigenous lands, and one of the pillars, of course, of Oceans Protection Plan and a key focus for the government is the involvement of Indigenous peoples in the program and in the procurements. As such, involving First Nations, Inuit, and Métis in our procurements is a key feature of these supply arrangements. So we've developed a strategy for using the supply arrangements in a way that will emphasize work with and benefit for Indigenous businesses and communities. So the strategy is actually based on steps. First, we'll determine within which, if any, Indigenous territory the vessel is located. Second, we'll determine if procurement obligations apply under a comprehensive land claim agreement or modern treaty. If so, of course, the individual procurement will be in accordance with those obligations. As a third step, if a modern treaty does not apply, there will still be an opportunity to potentially direct the work to Indigenous businesses in the applicable Indigenous territory should capacity exist. So, for example, if there is no CLCA that applies to that area, but we do know there's a local company that's on the supply arrangement, then we have the opportunity to set that aside and direct it that way. Finally, in the fourth step, and I think this kind of links back to what John was talking about finding a place in that supply chain of where folks fit, you know, as a fourth step where there is no Indigenous business capacity within the area to act as the prime contractor, the strategy provides for the possible inclusion of an Indigenous benefits plan. We'll talk about that a bit on the next slide. So This slide, though, basically is a graphic that depicts how the decisions will be made in terms of for the individual procurements conducted on the RFSAs, and how we're going to be, again, selecting what bidders are going to be invited to submit bids under for a particular vessel that we're addressing under the RFSAs. And no matter which RFSA, because right now I've mentioned we've got 3 of them, one of which has already been posted, and 2 of which are going to be shared the drafts are going to be shared in the coming weeks and months. The process will be the same on all of them. So just a little bit on Indigenous benefits plans. IBPs, Indigenous benefit plans, or IBPs, help Indigenous businesses succeed and grow by increasing capacity through employment, training, and subcontracting. Under the WAHV supply arrangements, when there is not an Indigenous supplier identified to do the work required, the federal government will look at the requirement and engage identified Indigenous communities to see where there may be opportunities for skills and capacity development. This can range anywhere from direct employment with a prime contractor, joint ventures, subcontracting, to bursaries, job shadowing, or apprenticeships. An IBP then could be drafted as a requirement to provide these benefits to Indigenous people and our businesses, and it would be included in the tender issued to qualified supply arrangement holders. And that's about it. I wanted to just thank everyone again for welcoming us today, and open to any questions that folks have. I did want to give another quick plug for again, we're going to be reaching out with the draft RFSAs for review. Hopefully, if all goes well and our timelines don't slip, towards the end of April, beginning of May. Welcome anyone who wants to join that. We're also going to be coupling that with a bit of a suppliers conference. We'll be able to get a bit more in depth on what the Indigenous benefits plans will actually look like in the RFSAs, and have a proper good presentation on that. Plus, our friends at Indigenous Services Canada will also be able to have the opportunity to talk a bit more about their programs.
Great, thank you so much, Erin. So I've shared Erin's email on the chat function. There's also links posted to the location of the recordings and presentations later on today. We had a question regarding inventory. Is that inventory of wrecked, abandoned, or hazardous vessels, is that public information?
Yeah, I think right now there's the actual inventory list. You know what? I don't know. I'm not sure if any of my colleagues at Coast Guard are on the line and might know the answer to that.
Hi, Erin. Stefan speaking from Coast Guard. The answer is that there's always been vision to make some aspects of the inventory public facing. We're not ready there yet. A lot of work and analysis has to be done into kind of data we have on it before we can do that. But yeah, at some point we'll get there. We're just still in development.
Great, thanks, Stefan.
Okay, there were no other questions posted in the chat. So if any of you have questions, you can just unmute yourself and ask away. We've got tremendous resource, not only in Erin and John, but there's a number of other folks from Coast Guard and Transport Canada available to answer any detailed questions you might have. Richard had a question about, are we able to better understand the 3-year priorities from the list?
I will take a stab at answering that. I'm not sure I've got a very good answer on that one. Right. I mean, I know that the RAM is based on a bunch of different factors: economic, hazardous, what's posing hazards versus what's not. So I don't know where things have been prioritized as of yet. That particular piece is just rolling out right now as well, literally over the last week or whatnot. The part of the issue is that it's a complex thing if we're talking about which vessels we're going to address, because before we can address one, even we need to we need to address ownership. So there has to be some strong attempts to make contact with the owners and see if they'll take responsibility before we can start acting on them, which is why it's hard to kind of come up with a list of what vessels are that we're going to be addressing. And also circumstances can change. I know there's one in Nootka Sound, which I believe, you know, ran into the ground 53 years ago, and sometime in the last few months just flipped over and now is leaking oil. So, you know, circumstances can change. I don't know if anyone, any of my colleagues over at Coast Guard or Transport have a better answer than that. But that's kind of what I have at this point.
Okay, one of the Paul Macedos has their hand up. I'm not sure which one it is, but whoever one of you has the hand up, now's your opportunity to unmute your mic and ask your question.
Hi, this is Chantal Gonzalez from the Canadian Coast Guard Central Region. I have a question after the presentation today, and sort of a summary, if you could please break it down in like 1 or 2 actions, immediate, and maybe in the next couple of months that First Nations and our Indigenous partners could take to be part of this procurement process. Like if you can summarize it in a couple of immediate actions that they could take, what would you say?
Thanks. That's a fantastic question. I would say the first thing would be to if there's companies that think they could be prime contractors for this, absolutely, you know, reach out to me, get on the list of companies that we're in touch with who will be reviewing the draft RFSAs. Even if if companies think they might be involved in some aspect of it, might not be primes, they might still have an interest in seeing that supply arrangement and how it might affect them. So I think that would be the first key. Knowing that a lot of the folks on the line are economic development officers, you know, I would also welcome you to, you know, do a scan of your communities and find out, you know, what sorts of skills and capabilities and whatnot are available or that folks are working on in the area or want to kind of grow. We want to make sure that you know, as many companies as we can get qualified in, and we're going to into the process, and we're going to be trying to see different ways we can create networking opportunities between different communities and folks who are able to do perhaps part of the work and with potential prime contractors. So again, just to keep in touch and particularly, like I said, scan for those skills and abilities, areas that might want to work on or work with us on, and then reaching out to us to stay in touch and get those updates when we're reaching out for the suppliers conference. You know, and another thing actually would also, if there are companies and whatnot that are not familiar with that supplier arrangement process, to definitely reach out to the Office of Small and Medium Enterprise and maybe learn those ropes. That would also be a great action.
John, you had something to add?
Yeah, I believe that Erin kind of covered part of it in her last statement. Basically, I think that one of the important things for either EDOs or for Indigenous businesses to do out of the gate is to kind of do a bit of a self-assessment on how ready you would be to participate in this type of government work. You know, going to the buyandsell.gc.ca website and getting slightly familiar with it, definitely contacting the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises, whether it's myself or one of our regional offices, to get more of that in-depth information and understanding of jargon and process, and just being ready, because when these opportunities come up, it's sometimes difficult to find them right away. Now, I will work with Cando and industry organizations and communities to make sure we're moving this information out as these processes begin. And I think Erin made a really great point about thinking about your community's capacity or your business's capacity to participate, and trying to find the right way to do that is really critical, because there's often situations where specifically small and medium-sized businesses they try to do everything in one jump, and it's often extraordinarily resource intensive, and it may actually create some burnout when you're trying to deal with us. So instead of trying to do everything at once, doing things in incremental ways can lead to really great benefits. So all I would say is check out the buyandSell.gc.ca website. Make sure you're asking questions as early as you would like, whether it's to someone like Erin or a member of her team or one of the Small Medium Enterprise offices, and just become familiar with this process over the next while, so that you're ready. And I think one of the critical components Erin talked about already is that with this supply arrangement, this isn't just a one-time opportunity and that this door will open and then it will close. The advantage of the strategy that's being used under this program of work is that because it's a supply arrangement that's going to be open in perpetuity or continuously open, that it actually allows people to figure out where they'd like to participate and then do it a little bit more in a strategic way rather than having to rush through a process, let's say in a 40-day timeline. So there's some of the elements that I would really love to see businesses or EDOs focus on in the coming months. And obviously, one of the things that we also would love to do is see people come back to additional events that Erin and her team are going to be organizing over the coming months, that you can then have the opportunity incrementally to learn a lot more. So they're kind of those points that I would like to see. And maybe it's something that OSME and Erin's team can put together a bit of a next steps checklist for folks, and we can have Cando publish that or provide that to everyone that's registered for this event. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Victoria, you had a question?
Hi, Paul.
Hi,
Great
Victoria.
presentation. Thank you very much. Interesting topic. I think there's some potential here for our companies. My question is related, it's more for Erin. I'm wondering if there's a history of Indigenous companies successfully being awarded these type of projects, or is this a new direction for the program?
I was just about to start answering when I was on mute, and here I was doing so well this time, not muting myself or speaking while I was on mute. It's a new program, so for this specific type of work, there isn't much history at all. But I do know that some of the interim procurements that were done, particularly, I think there was at least one in Atlantic Canada that was awarded to an Indigenous company for the disposal of a small vessel. I unfortunately don't have the name of that vessel or the company on hand right now. But certainly, knowing the direction of Oceans Protection Plan and if I might say so, the interests of my team as well, and the interests of our departments, it's a keen aspect that we're really building on for the future of this program.
We have a question from Cindy Collins. Is there anyone monitoring the rivers and boat launches for potential or already derelict hazardous wrecked vessels, yachts, boats in our waterways?
I'm not sure. Stefan, if you're on the line, would you have some thoughts on that at all? I know that monitoring vessels, I know there's different ways where the public can report them in.
That's
but
right.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, there's especially for inland waterways, where the Coast Guard, that's all I can speak for is the Coast Guard, and even then from a national perspective. But the Coast Guard doesn't have a presence. We have a federal single window process where it's basically 1-800 numbers divided up by regions, that anybody who observes something that they consider might be a wrecked or abandoned vessel, they can report the number, and then it will go to our regional operations center where it will be sort of assessed and sent to the right people to action it appropriately. So that's the system we're operating on currently. So it's kind of it's a reporting system. And it's funny, I saw the comment. I've been trying to actually dig up the 1-800 numbers on my computer, but I'm getting the blue wheel of death. So as soon as I do, I'll actually post those numbers in the chat.
Great. We had a question from, was it, oh, it's gone now. It was from Paul Macedo, who had his hand up. Failing that, there's a comment about from northern Saskatchewan about a concern for vehicles that are in lakes. Obviously, that vehicle would probably be a wheeled vehicle that was abandoned on ice or went through ice. Does that impact Coast Guard and Transport Canada in any way, or is that something different?
I'm not sure, again, if Stefan, if you would have an answer on that. I know from a previous discussion that I understand if a vessel were, say, for example, to run aground and there was, sea containers that fell off of it, that those containers would be included, but I'm not quite sure where the line is drawn under this particular act for what's.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. I would, to be 100% on this one, I would have to talk to somebody who's probably a lawyer. To be absolutely sure, but my understanding is that, yeah, no, that wouldn't be a vessel of concern, that it actually, unless it was cargo that fell off a ship. That's where the line has been drawn, is my understanding. So in a lake or a river, a mishap that's happened during ice fishing or whatever, no, that wouldn't fall under our jurisdiction. In fact, I'm not sure whose it would be. We'd have to look into that.
Fair enough. Will the Paul Macedo that had their hand up, I just dropped your hand. If you want to ask your question, please unmute yourself.
I have a question. This is Chantal Gonzalez again. Well, I have two questions. The first one is, we have been talking about contracts that are over $25,000. I want to know if through this strategy, are there going to be opportunities for contracts that are lower than $25,000, and is the process the same? And yeah, that's my first question. And the second question would be, can several communities, 2 or more communities, partner to apply for this process and get a supply arrangement? Or is are these type of partnerships encouraged or even possible, or have they happened in the past?
Thanks. Yeah. So for your first question, we haven't actually limited the supply arrangements to only things that are over 25,000. Our intent is that, unless it's something like a credit card buy, that everything will go through this. Everything will go through the supply arrangements, no matter the dollar value. We did make a difference between small and medium vessels versus large vessels. There will obviously be a dollar difference there for recycling to disposal. A lot less expensive for the small medium vessels versus large cargo ships, very large fishing boats or whatnot. I should also mention, not that this was part of the question, but these supply arrangements will also be used for Canada's own vessels. So if we were to dispose of our own, ferries and things like that, we'll be using it. So all that to say that, yes, the intent is that no matter the vessel and the cost related, we'll be using the supply arrangements. I do encourage you, particularly with the technical assessments supply arrangement, if there is interest in that work, to take a look at it, because it works very differently from normal supply arrangements, in that a typical supply arrangement will kind of lay the groundwork with some basic clausing and framework for issue in a normal RFP. What we've done to simplify it is basically make a checklist, form where we check off a bunch of boxes, send that form to the supply arrangement holders, who then fill out a price and send it back, and that takes the place of the RFP and becomes the contract. So it's a little bit different, but again, just to make things simple, knowing that the dollar value for those contracts are probably going to be a bit lower as well. So don't want to have everyone spend days and days and days filling out RFPs or responding to RFPs. And I apologize, but your second question has slipped my mind.
It was about partnerships between communities to make sure, complement their capacity, etc.
Yes, absolutely. You know, in the form of joint ventures and whatnot, we definitely encourage that. That is always welcome. Certainly language about that is in the supply arrangements, but it's varied probably in the general terms and conditions or the, you know, other referenced clausing. I'll be the first to admit that government contracting is not exactly simple. But yes, those types of partnerships are definitely encouraged. And just to follow on to what John was saying, he did mention in the chat for those who might not be reading it, that on the 25K, usually the buyandsell.gc.ca posts opportunities over 25K. But if supply arrangement is used, then all related opportunities will be using that specific supply arrangement regardless of the dollar value. So that is, thank you, John, for that. That is good to note that, you know, part of the thing with the supply arrangement is that the supply arrangement is advertised, but you know, we won't be posting notices on buy and sell for every time we go out using that supply arrangement. It'll just be go to the supply arrangement holders that were identified using that selection of bidders kind of decision tree on that deck that I shared.
Thank you. There's a question from Cindy Collins on the chat. Is there going to be a policy or terms of reference amendment where the reported vessels, boats, yachts, etc., are of environment impacts going to be notifying the owner or government to have it removed before the vessel, boat, yacht sinks?
Again, I think that would land more on the policy side. So I'm not sure if Coast Guard or Transport Canada has an answer to that. I can say, at least on the environmental side, in the supply arrangements, that there will be a big focus on doing things in the most environmentally friendly manner. Sounds to me like the question is more closely linked to prioritization. I don't know, Stefan, if you, I keep putting you on the spot. I apologize for that. That wasn't part of the plan, but I don't know if you have any more information on that.
Sorry, I actually missed the question because I was trying to paste something to the chat. Can you summarize it for me quickly, Erin?
Basically, just wondering if there's going to be a policy or terms of reference where the reported vessels are impacting the environment, and you know, will the owner be notified to have it removed before the vessel you know, sinks?
Okay, so okay, the way the program works is, yes, the legislation is at least partially intended to hold owners to account. So the sort of the response component for the Coast Guard is, if we detect a hazard, the concept is that we would hold owners responsible, in fact, before it sinks. So the notion is that, yes, if we become aware of it, we assess that there's a hazard. We assess that, you know, the hazard might be that it's, you know, to the environment or to safety, should the vessel sink or whatever, that the orders can be issued to the owner to address that at their own expense. So all that is sort of being fleshed out as we speak, and that's the notion. That's what's in the law. So whether it's terms of reference or policy, or there's secondary pieces that have to be built to, I don't know, to prop that up, I'm not sure. I'm not a policy guy, but that's how the WAHV, the Act, is supposed to function, indeed.
Thanks, Stefan. And I should probably point out, Stefan just put in the chat the 1-800, a link to the 1-800 numbers for reporting a vessel.
Great. Are there any more questions from?
I did notice one in the chat that we haven't addressed yet.
Okay.
It says, how much of the work generally is environmental work versus heavy equipment construction type work? The answer is, honestly, it depends. It depends on mainly, from my understanding, on the size of the vessel and where the vessel is located. Absolutely, there could be some situations where it's a very small vessel that disposing of the vessel won't be that costly by comparison to getting to the vessel in order to dispose of it. So that's, again, where a big part of the environmental piece will come into play. On On the other hand, larger vessels that might just be in larger bodies of water, in that case, the most of the work would be on the actual deconstruction side of things.
Great. Peter is asking for some information about waterways in Saskatchewan and what's in store for lakes and rivers that are being neglected. I think that's kind of outside of the...
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to provide some information in that vein. I actually, my was in Saskatchewan. So I have a big part of my heart for Saskatchewan, but I don't have any information on that. And I'm not sure who the contacts would be. I'm not sure if any of the other partners on the line would have any information on that. It doesn't sound like anyone does. I'm not sure if that's under perhaps a different initiative.
I can just speak for the vessels of concern. Our focus in Coast Guard would be hazardous vessels. So that's the two variables are vessels, and they have to be hazardous, and that's the focus of the scope of what we're talking about here. Although I have to say, being a Saskatchewan boy too, I get it. But if there is in fact a vessel that is causing concern on a river or a lake in Saskatchewan, yeah, that falls within the program and it needs to go through our single window notification.
Okay. Thank you, Stefan.
Great, thanks.
Richard had a question about if there's any information on the budget envelope.
Yeah, that's again another good question. Right now, the budget is still kind of being fleshed out. So we don't have any numbers right now to share. I can say that it is going to be significant enough to be of interest. I know there is work coming this fiscal, like the upcoming fiscal year that starts on April 1st. But I do think that depending on the department, they're going to have more budget in potentially following years. But all of that is still up, is still being fleshed out and determined.
Great, thank you. Okay, so just as housekeeping at the end, just while some of you might formulate some more questions, both presentations and the recording will be available later today at edo.ca, Cando's website. Just go to the news, and WAHV is right at the top. Click on that and all the resources are there. There's some additional resources that have been posted for today, including the link to the buy and sell .gc.ca for the WAHV program. That's there. There's also a session next week on the 24th en français for those that want the information in French. That's available Wednesday, 10 a.m. Mountain next week on the 24th. What else is there? I thank you all for joining us today. We know that your time is valuable and precious, and we thank you for sharing some of that time with us. I thank Erin Fox so much for your knowledge and insight. John Johnstone for a little bit of insight. No, I'm kidding. For all that you have to share, and thank you for putting up with me kind of bouncing around sometimes aimlessly. We at Cando are very proud to partner with public and private sector, and we're very pleased to bring the results of those partnerships to you whenever we can. And so we're very proud to work with PSPC, very proud of the work that we do with OSME and the opportunities that might present to EDOs, because we know that EDOs are the business hub of their community. They're the conduit in and out. And so we're very pleased to kind of feed that conduit with opportunity. That's kind of our role moving forward. And so we thank you for taking the time out to participate in some of the efforts that we have to share opportunities with you. So if there aren't any more questions, I thank you and look forward to joining you again in the future for some opportunities as they develop. So thank you, everyone. Okay,
Thanks so
take
much.
care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye now.